All right, the Road to UFC opening round is now fully completed out in Shanghai, and I'm here to break down all the action for you. Really enjoyed watching the second day of action today. We had 9 fights go down, 18 fighters. The brackets are now complete, and for the next couple months, we can just take it easy and look forward to the semifinal round. Forgive me if I'm a little bit nonsensical today. I've been up since 2:45 a.m. for the last 2 days. It is now 7:30 my local time, and so not all the wires are totally connecting in my brain, but that's okay. Part of that is just the excitement over the tournament. Hope you enjoyed all of it as well too. I'm going to go over every single fight and basically give my reaction to how things went down. If you don't know me, my name is Chris. I'm the owner of MMA Ecosystem, where I cover Asian MMA news, in particular, Road to UFC. So give me a subscribe, like the video, all that good stuff. Let's get into it. So the first fight of the evening was a non-tournament fight between Kiwon Bean and Tetsuya Saika. I expected this fight to honestly be a pretty bad matchup for Kiwon Bean, as sometimes he's shown himself to not have the best striking defense, not the best chin. Saika is a really good kickboxer. So in this fight, that's basically how it went down the first round of the fight. Is it looked like Kiwon Bean was going to be on skates pretty quickly. Saika blasted him with punches, and Kiwon Bean tried to slow things down, tried to clinch, bring things down to the ground. And by the end of the round, he was actually able to land some pretty good punches on the feet as well. So Kiwon Bean, really strong will to keep going, did not want to lose this UFC opportunity. And when round two started, it looked like Saika might be a little bit tired, and Kiwon Bean capitalized. Basically, the roles reversed, and Kiwon Bean got his man up against the cage, blasted away with punches, and got the stoppage by TKO in the second round. Uh, the question is Kiwon Bean UFC ready? Personally, I would say hold off for just a second. I don't feel like he's had some hit or miss moments in the previous UFC tournaments. He's appeared for the last 2 seasons, uh, lost by disqualification, made it to the semifinals the first round, then lost to Jekka Sargi. I feel like, um, I wouldn't be terribly mad if he got signed to the UFC, but I feel like maybe one more fight and then we're all good. Could put him in like a non-tournament fight in the semifinal round just to totally see, is this guy UFC ready? But otherwise, not a terrible performance from Kiwon Bean. Would just like to see a little bit more. All right, this second fight, gosh, this was a ridiculous fight to see happen in the opening round. Choi Dong-hoon versus Jinyu Shirya, the first of the flyweight fights. I always felt like this was number one versus number two in the flyweight division, or maybe number one versus number three. If you watch my flyweight breakdown video, which you can check out after the fact to see how I did on my picks and predictions for the flyweight tournament, I actually seeded all of the fighters. Jinyu Shirya, I ranked as number one, Toki Matsui number two, and Choi Dong-hoon as number three. So this fight went down in a lot of ways similarly to how I thought it would go. I thought that Jinyu Shirya overall would be able to command the distance and set the pace on the feet, which in general he did. Choi Dong-hoon would have the advantage with the takedowns. Jinyu Shirya may try to get him to the ground, but run into a brick wall of Choi Dong-hoon's hips. And that's more or less what happened. There's some controversy over the scoring of the fight. I probably leaned towards Jinyu Shirya 2 rounds to 1 in the fight. But it was a close fight. I didn't ultimately have any problem with how it was scored. It was a split decision win, 29-28, 2-1 for Choi Dong-hoon. Basically, the first round was a little bit more of a feeling out process. Jinyu Shirya, I felt like landing at a little bit more high frequency. Body shots looked good for Jinyu Shirya. Round two, it looked like Choi started to find his range a little bit, kind of fighting his way in there. And the key moment in that second round was the lateral drop attempt from Jinu Shirye failed. It's so hard to take down a guy that, I mean, Choi Dong-hoon, Samba background, judo black belt. It's going to be really hard to just pull this guy to the ground. He's going to have really strong hips, and especially with the judo, he's going to be able to reverse you. That's exactly what happened. Finishes the round or fights from the top position for the rest of the fight. Round three, things are close. You may have it 1-1. Choi looks he saw the success that he had in round two on the ground against Jin Shirye, so he immediately goes back to that clinch. From there, basically for the rest of the fight, the two are trading at range. I felt like Jin Shirye getting a little bit better of those punches, but it was really close. If I went back over and watched the fight, I may think differently. Sucks for Jin Shirye to get just barely snubbed 2 fights in a row. I'm okay. The positive side of this is that rather than going right back into Road to UFC the next season, a few months later, Jin Shirye can take the whole next year to improve, maybe fight once or twice internationally within China, and kind of get to polish things up. So he's just 23 years old. He's got a really long future as well. So Choi Dong-hoon, he is going to fight, let's see, the winner of Angad Bisht and John Almanza, which was Angad Bisht. Just looking off the notes I wrote down here. The next fight was a lot of fun. This was Yoo-Soo Young against Shohei Nosei. A lot of people favored Yoo-Soo Young as maybe the best Korean prospect in the whole Road to UFC season this year, which I probably agreed, but I thought the matchup they gave him, at first I didn't like it because I felt like it was going to be a tough matchup for Yoo-Soo Young. I felt like Shohei Nosei has not always been very, both of these guys I would say have a lot of problems, a lot of lack on the feet, but they really shine on the mat. And, for Shohei Nosei, he's more of a judo guy. I think he's a BJJ brown belt. Yoo-Soo Young, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. So in this fight, you really got to see a lot of exciting grappling exchanges. Overall, it was Yoo-Soo Young who was the heavier guy, who had the stronger hips, able to stay on top. Shohei Nosei throwing up a lot of submission attempts, even a buggy choke at one point, but nothing really threatening at all. And basically over the 3 rounds, you saw a lot of scrambles, but it was Yoo-Soo Young's, his power, like I said, staying on top, his heaviness ultimately nets him the win. And I'm really glad to see that, honestly, because it seemed like of all the Korean fighters in this Road to UFC season, there's been a lot of complaints from Korean fans that a lot of the best Korean fighters aren't here. They were sad to see a lot of older returning fighters come back to the season, but Yoo-Soo Young seems to be the guy that they're really getting behind. So I was glad to see that that there's something for Korean fans to be really excited for going forward in this tournament. I think they're really going to get behind Yoo-Soo Young. In the next fight, he is going to fight Daramisi Jaupasi, which should be another excellent fight. Potentially another really great grappling fight between Daramisi and Yoo-Soo Young. So the judges' scorecards, 30-27, 30-27, 29-28 in favor of Yoo-Soo Young. And then the next one, Angad Bisht of India against John Almanza from Philippines. Philippines is really interesting because they have had several fighters over the 3 seasons get into Road to UFC, but they've never actually even made it to the semifinal round until this year. However, a little bit of an asterisk there because that fight, Toki Matsui against Ruel Peñales, canceled because Matsui missed weight, and so Peñales gets a bye to the next round. So kind of a weird situation there, but the other Filipino fighter of this season, John Almanza, going against Angad Bisht. And I felt like this was the whole striker versus grappler debate is getting more and more gray in MMA, but the broadcast was actually touting John Almanza's grappling in this fight, and I think it is good, but compared to Angad Bisht, Bish just has such a clear advantage, such a tank on the ground. And you really saw that. John Almanza really clean striking, trying to strike with On God Bish, but happy to see a little bit of progression I felt from On God Bish. He pressed in pretty quickly. Sometimes he kind of locks up for a little bit, takes him a little while to wake up in a fight, but not so today. You saw him really press, tried to set up the takedown with the right hook, successfully gets the fight to the mat, and basically just rather than look for the submission like he usually does, just punches away from every single position until the referee just had seen enough punches get through and he stops the fight. At first, I kind of felt like it might be a little bit too early, but once I saw the face of John Almanza pretty marked up, pretty swollen, I felt like it was probably a good stoppage. So, congrats to Angad Bish, the first fighter from India to make it to the semifinals, to win it all in Road to UFC since Anshul Jubli. And you got to think the Indian fans are so relieved to see that. I felt like Angad was probably the guy to do it. I've they've had Road UFC has had trouble recruiting the best Indian talent. There are good fighters in India right now, and it's evidenced by Angad Bish. They finally got this guy. I wonder if that had something to do with Angad signing with Iridium Management. Iridium basically is just like has maybe like one of the closest pipelines to the UFC in terms of manager promotion relationship. So I was so happy to see Angad Bish in Road to UFC season 3. And in the next round, he is going to be fighting Choi Dong-hoon, which is such an interesting fight. So many levels you can break that down. Ultimately, like, I think Choi, I would give him the advantage of the fight, definitely in the striking, but Angad seems like he is a rapidly growing fighter. His striking looked to be a little bit more alive today than it was in the past. And the real question is Angad going to be able to get Choi Dong-hoon to the ground? That is the question. The other question is Angad Bish going to be able to land his big right hand against Choi Dong-hoon? Those are the two things that I think is the biggest question marks, and hopefully we can break that down a little bit more as the fight gets closer. But overall, I think the Choi Dong-hoon has a lot more options to win this fight. Not only win, but also dictate where the fight goes. I think that overall he may be able to block the takedown shot of Angad Bish, but I feel really hesitant just counting Angad out as well. So we'll definitely explore that later as the fight gets closer, coming up at the end of the summer. All right, moving on in the first episode. This was such an interesting fight. Bantamweight fight between Ren Ozaki and Daramisi Jawupasi. I'll be honest, I didn't know what to expect from Ren Ozaki. I wasn't really familiar with this guy at all. I hadn't even heard his name when they announced it for Road to UFC. And so I think just based on some of the charisma, dominance, wrestling, finishing ability of Daramisi in the past, I just kind of sided with him to win this fight. But even though he did end up winning the fight, I definitely regret siding so strongly with Daramisi. Ren Ozaki looks like he could be a really solid Japanese prospect going into the future. Came into this fight with 8 pro fights under his record, undefeated at 6-0-2, and looked extremely slick on the feet, really piecing up Daramisi most of the time when they're on the feet. It was once they got to the ground that Daramisi had a lot more success, although you saw it. Hardly able to keep Ren Ozaki on the ground. He keeps rising back up to his feet over and over again. Hard to even call it a dominant fight for Daramisi, even though most likely I think he won most of the rounds. I'll get to the judges' scorecards in a second, but overall, yeah, you could score that first round for Ozaki, able to light up Daramisi a little bit. But overall, yeah, Daramisi, you saw him lean on his wrestling. I think the main takeaway here of this fight, not only Ren Ozaki, solid prospect, but Daramisi's cardio. You saw in the last time we saw him in Road UFC against Lee Chong-ho, he went hard to start the fight and then kind of gassed out. So energy management, I think, was a big thing to watch for Daramisi. May still be going forward in Road UFC for him, but that was something I was really watching for. Is he going to gas out? Is he going to tire? And it looked like he looked like he had the strength to make it all the way to the end of the fight. The judges scored the fight 29-28 across the board for Daramisi, most likely scoring that first round for Ren Ozaki. And for Ren, if I'm like another Asian promotion, I'm like jumping to pick this guy up. If I'm One Championship, if I'm PFL, you're jumping to pick this guy up because how good he looked, how young he is. I think if the UFC should really keep this guy close to the chest if they can. Honestly, if I were the UFC, and maybe this is a bad idea now that I think about it, but you got Contender Series coming up. And from what I know, there's going to be some Asian fighters on the Contender Series this year. At least that's in the works. And so you could offer Ren Ozaki a spot in Contender Series. That's definitely something you could do. Although you may want to just let him develop a little bit more on the regional scene as well. Now that I think about it, that may be a better option. But either way, both guys looked great, much improved for Daramisi. Daramisi going against Yu Su Young in the semifinals. And that's a tough one. I feel like Yu Su Young ultimately has more tools to win and finish the fight. I feel like his expertise on the ground is a little bit deeper. So what you may see in the fight, if Daramisi feels that way as well, you may end up seeing a striking fight. And we haven't seen a whole lot from the striking of Daramisi and Yu Su Young. I mean, we saw in Yu Su Young's last NISA title fight, he got beat up pretty bad on the feet. So I don't know if Daramisi would be able to emulate that, but it's definitely a fight that I would want to watch and study in preparation for that. Either way, exceptional fight. So that was the first episode, episode 3. Episodes 1 and 2 were yesterday. Episode 4, the last one, just 4 fights on this episode, kicked off with Yan Qihui versus Lisa Kiriako at flyweight. This was a non-tournament fight and kind of an odd one. I personally felt like Kiriako probably took this fight just based on damage. I don't know if anyone else felt this way, but it felt like the judging overall through Road to UFC, there was a lot of judges that almost seemed to value takedowns and just grappling positioning as almost as valuable, if not more valuable than damage, which shouldn't be the way fights are scored. But it seems like some of those judges were out in full force for this fight as well. Basically, in the first round, you saw Yan Qihui lean on her wrestling, the left hook, the double leg in display throughout the whole fight. She's able to get Lisa Kiriako down, not just in round 1, but in rounds 2 and 3 over and over again. Kiriako able to get back up to her feet. Yan Qihui never really able to do a whole lot on the ground, never really able to work her ground and pound. Wasn't until round 2 that you saw Kiriako start to get her range a little bit and be able to work her striking. I felt like in rounds 2 and 3 that she was able to land more damage throughout those 2 rounds on the feet, able to work that jab pretty well against Yan Qihui, having a massive reach advantage. I mean, you saw just this massive, not appearance of weight, but just like the two totally different body types in action there. That was really interesting. Kiriako, pretty suspect takedown defense, but not bad attempts to get back up to the feet. Yan Qihui having a hard time closing the distance against Kiriako on the feet. It felt like I felt a little bit disappointed after this fight, just that it didn't feel like either fighter would be totally ready for the UFC. Yan Qihui she just has her body type makes it really difficult to really fit in to any weight class because she is so short, because her reach is so small. She has a hard time closing the distance against fighters to land her heavy shots. She has really devastating striking when she can get in close, but because of her muscle mass, it's unlikely that you're ever going to see her cut down to like straw weight. So I even would venture to imagine it's a pretty tough cut, even down to 125. Kiriako, I feel like I've always felt like she's like maybe one of the top, if not the top Australian women's prospect. And so I did side with her to win the fight. However, I think it should be back to the regional scene for both fighters. Yan Hui ultimately getting the split decision. And guys, check out these scorecards. 230-27s for Yan Hui, 129-28 for Kyriako. Obviously, two judges were all about takedowns and grappling, even though there wasn't really any offense that came about from those takedowns. Where one judge, like me, scored most likely the second and third rounds for Lisa Kyriako on the damage that she landed on the feet. So really odd stuff. I feel like the judging was pretty wonky overall throughout this whole season, or throughout the opening round. And both fighters, I'll be interested to see what comes next for the two of them. The next fight was another kind of weird one, Tokitaka Nakanishi against Kim Kyo-sung. And ultimately, Nakanishi gets the unanimous decision. Judges score it 30-27, 30-27, 29-27. A little bit confused by that scorecard. Unanimously for Nakanishi. And you watch this fight, and there really wasn't a whole lot that happened out throughout this fight, especially in the way of damage. Didn't seem like I'd be really curious to see what the actual strike totals were for throughout the whole fight, because didn't really seem like either guy landed anything of consequence. When Nakanishi was able to get Kim on the ground, which was often, never really landed a whole lot of offense there. So, yeah, kind of a weird fight. You saw Nakanishi from half guard. Basically in round 3, Nakanishi trying to get the rear naked choke submission, unable to find it as Kim was hand fighting, and the fight ends. What more can you say about this fight other than just grappling dominance from Nakanishi? Nakanishi, I expected more from him. He's going to fight Baer Gung-Jela Issa. He's going to have to bring more to the table. He's going to have to bring a little bit more firepower, a little bit more offense if he wants to take out Baer. I don't foresee him doing the same thing that he did to Kim Kyo-sung against Baer, putting him on his back for the whole fight. So unless he's able to catch some kind of submission, maybe it's just a style thing. The two guys will bring out the best in each other. But I do think Baer, based on what I've seen so far, probably going to take that semifinal fight and make it to the finals. If I just tried to predict things right now, I'd say it's probably going to be Baer against Yu-Soo Young in the finals, which would be really exciting. I like that fight a lot. Moving on to flyweight, In Shuai versus Kiro Singh Sahota. I was really looking forward to this fight because of the clash of styles. In Shuai seemed like he wanted to wrestle a lot more, which surprised me a little bit. Excuse me. I thought In Shuai would maybe, it seems like in the past, sometimes he falls in love with the big knockout shot. And I thought that he may try to land that against Kiro Singh Sahota. Sahota, honestly, in the past, I've seen him have pretty solid takedown defense, but In Shuai able to get some takedowns here and there, just not really able to land a lot with it. Ultimately, I felt like when they would exchange, when there'd be combinations, and I broke this down in my video a couple weeks ago. Sahota, he's going to be landing the longer combinations. His was it end of round 1 or end of round 2? It was Kiro Singh Sahota, yeah, in that first round, able to land the heavier blows. And yeah, ultimately, in terms of damage, it was all Sahota. A couple big strikes here and there from In Shuai, but and to be honest, I felt like this was an upgraded and improved performance from In Shuai. It seemed like he was operating on a couple different levels. It seemed like in the past it was kind of just like big chopping low kicks, overhand rights, just like single strikes, and it seemed like he was able to think from a couple different levels. So definitely some improvement of seeing from him training at Bang Tao, training at Black Tiger in Beijing. I definitely think that he is an amazing prospect to watch going forward. I'd love to see him actually back in Road to UFC next year after another fight or two. But Kiro Singh Sahota, I think, a pretty well-rounded guy, trains with a great team, has a lot of different weapons in the fight, and I think he deserved the win as well. He's going to fight Ruel Penales in the semifinals, which it's kind of hard to predict that fight since we didn't get to see Ruel fight in the semis or in the opening round. Overall, I think Sahota, I probably would lean with him based on the tape study that I did on Ruel Penales. So I do think probably you're going to have in the finals for the flyweight bracket, Choi Dong-hoon against Kiro Singh Sahota, which I would favor Choi there. But a lot that has to happen from now until then. Ruel Penales still has something to say about that. Also, On God Bish, kind of a wild card in there as well. So flyweight still really interesting, but good stuff from Kiro Singh Sahota. The last fight of the whole opening round was against Jalela Issa and Li Yunfeng. I criticized the selection of Li Yunfeng quite a bit going up to this fight. I felt like there were other fighters in Asia, especially at bantamweight, that could have filled this spot, but they ultimately went with Li Yunfeng, and I thought this was going to be a really easy fight for Baragung, and overall, it was. Overall, you saw Baragung able to get the fight to the ground quite a bit, although Li Yunfeng, got to give him a lot of credit, able to defend takedowns, able to land some pretty solid striking. When you saw him strike, his combinations were pretty to watch. So Li Yunfeng, for me, he was a prospect for a second that I was really high on, and then he lost a bunch of fights to fighters I felt like he should have beat. And so I basically let out all of that hype. And for him, I just need to see him compete more on the regional scene. Don't even go international. Don't fight, a lot of big name, honestly, fighters like Baragung on the regional scene. Just get your feet back underneath of you. Even take some easy fights, build back confidence, and then work your way up from there. But ultimately, this was all Baragung. He gets Li Yunfeng to the ground over and over again. Um, Evades the triangle choke of Li Yunfeng. Round two, we're back on the ground. Baragung near the end of the round, locking in the rear naked choke and chokes out Li Yunfeng unconscious. So you're going to have Baragung against Tokitaka in these semifinal rounds. Kind of went over that already, but I do think Baragung is going to be able to take that. Just seems like a guy that has a lot more, he's got a lot more firepower than Nakanishi. He's not just going to be content to wrestle and hold a guy down. I think Baragung takes that and makes it to the finals. So, there you have it, guys. Exciting stuff from Road to UFC and the opening round. Really looking forward to covering this as time goes on. Hoping to potentially cover some of these fights in person going forward later this year. We'll have to see about that. Wang Cong, I know, has been offered a UFC contract. I don't see why she wouldn't sign it. But she has been offered that by the UFC. They mentioned that on the broadcast, and I heard that also earlier this morning as well from folks close to Wang Cong. So I would expect you'll probably see her in the UFC next. So if she does sign that contract, congrats to her. That does it for me from Portland, Oregon, USA. That wraps up the Road to UFC opening round, and we'll see you next time in the semifinals.